Welcome to Mission Apollo, our second ever podcast. Thank you to everyone for their name suggestions. We appreciate everyone's input and got some great name suggestions out there, but Mission Apollo I think fit the best. We're excited to go into episode 2 now. So today my guest is our CTO, our master technician, lead engineer, and the mad scientist himself, Mr. Eloi. Bienvenue. Ça va?
Oui, thank you for receiving me in your beautiful studio.
Thank you. It's quite a nice studio we have here. So today we wanted to go over some of the more technical aspects of our scooters and I guess what goes inside of them and what makes them tick and what makes them work. So you're the perfect person to have here and I'm going to try and follow along as best I can.
Beautiful.
I guess we recently dropped a video where you went into a new controller that you're working on, right? A new upgraded Ludo controller?
Correct. Our new version for the 2021 lineup. I guess I'll explain a bit more like how I know so much about that kind of controllers, where I started with this and where we are going. So as many of you probably already know, I was making electric skateboard before, and it's back then that I realized that those controllers were pretty special, because basically in an electric skateboard right now, it's plug and play, the same thing as an electric scooter, but the main difference is that you have a region brake on electric skateboard. So the question,
skateboard, wow.
Yeah, exactly, because you don't have any brake disc or drum brake, whatever, you don't have any brakes, so you need region brake, strong one and good one on electric skateboard. So it was already a step further in the electric skateboard market, but you realize right off the bat when you test one of those controllers that you are able to get much better efficiency out of the same setup when you have those kind of controllers. To give you an example, when you plug a regular controller, we're going to call it a Chinese controller for the sake of this podcast. When you plug a Chinese controller, you lose about maybe 25% of range and power compared of when you use the VESC controller. This is the real name of the Ludo controller. It's VESC. And the reason behind that is because you have more capacitor inside, and it's just the back end code that is running the software inside that controller have been working by so many people. It's open source that the efficiency, it's incredible now, and it's just getting better and better. So this is how I started with those kind of controllers. So even back then when I was building all my electric skateboard, I was putting those kind of VESC controller inside.
So it's like the quality of components inside that
exactly
speeds up the efficiency.
Exactly. And
Interesting.
The tech really the tech inside those controllers really step up quick, because when I was doing electric skateboard, the maximum voltage you could put into those controllers, it's 11S or 12S. This means it's 12 battery cells in series. That was equal, I think, to 50.4 volt when full. So you can imagine for electric scooter that the nominal voltage is 48 volt and a maximum of 54 for our lowest scooter in the city, or even the light. It was not suitable. So you cannot even imagine it on the Pro or the Phantom or the Ultra that is 72 volt, 60 volt, and 52 volt. I think we should address the Lacroix situation before we even start talking about this controller. Lacroix really made the whole market step up their game. It's because of them that we can have so high voltage on those controllers. They developed the hardware, and after that everyone did their own version of it. If it was not from Lacroix, we will not be having this discussion today. They help us configure the whole thing. They sell us the first sample of this VESC with high voltage. We owe them a lot. And the reason why, we're going to go over the reason why we decided to switch towards our own controller. But we have gratitude for Lacroix. I want to make this very clear.
So, sorry, just to clarify, I guess for people who don't know, Lacroix is the manufacturer of Stormcore?
Sorry, yes.
Okay.
Basically, Lacroix is a Montreal electric skateboard company. They are making super high-end electric skateboard. It's the equivalent of Ryan for electric skateboard.
Okay. I think English translation for that name is The Cross, right? Just in case anyone wasn't sure.
Yes. Nobody call it like this, but
yeah.
Yes, it will. And basically they call it Lacroix because here in Montreal we have the Mont Royal, and on top of it you have a big cross that is also called
famous
La
landmark.
Croix. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. La
Okay.
Croix in French.
Makes sense. So yeah, we got the Stormcore controllers from them, and that's what we were using for all of our Ludo upgrades for a while, right?
Exactly. So when we started trying to do the Ludo, it was extremely complicated. We had to bring the whole scooter to their shop to try to configure it.
Oh wow.
It was complicated because the code to roll those kind of motors at those amp and voltage were just not written inside the software. So we had to write all the code to make it work. And everyone now using a VES controller inside the scooter, it's because of us that you can do it. So even if you buy it somewhere else, please be
Careful.
Yeah, Apollo is still behind a good chunk of it, so we bring it there. We burned I don't know how many motors, the batteries. We really tried to push it to the limit to put the maximum power within the same code, if I can say it like this. Basically, the maximum efficiency that we could get, and to find the maximum efficiency, well, we have to burn components. And so we started with the Pro, and after that we went to the Ultra, and hopefully soon the Phantom.
But with that upgrade, we lost some features from the Pro that some people were expecting, I guess, right? Like the light feature, and then we removed the display. What was the reason behind that, I guess? Like, why did we have to remove those?
So basically, in the Stormcore, let me rephrase. All the feature on a scooter work on either 9 volt or 12 volts. So you need a converter, either located inside the controller, but for Chinese controller, regular controller, it's often outside. So you are taking the voltage from the battery that is, let's say 52 volt, and you're downgrading it to 12 volt, and after that you shoot that 12 volt into LEDs light to make them powered. The issue we had with the Stormcore controller, it was only a 5 volt output, so it's not enough to make the LED shine, because there's a minimum voltage that those LED can work on, and even if they were able to work at 5 volt, it will be so weak, it's not even worth it. So the only solution to that was to put a converter next to the Stormcore and plug it directly to the battery. It was adding too many steps into the process, and as we'll discuss, the Stormcore was already creating a lot of heat inside the scooter, so having an external converter that is also producing a fair amount of heat would have just been too much for the scooter to handle temperature-wise.
Okay, so having the two together would be too much. But just to clarify, having the Stormcore by itself should not overheat if it's calibrated correctly by you, because you know what you're doing. And
it depends on the voltage, and that's another point we're going to address, I guess, later. But the Stormcore was overheating when you went above 60 volt. When you are into like the Ultra, all the Ultra Ludo we made, did overheat, and the only way to fix that is to put built-in fan, like a gaming PC basically inside, to push the air out. But technically the Stormcore can reach 100 volt, but in practice it's not the case, at least not as the current hardware is designed, the case and everything around it.
so that's why we always wanted expert advice and maybe calibration of these controllers before we actually ship them out to our customers and anyone.
Exactly.
Well, we don't recommend other people working on them. But now with the new Stormcore control, not the new Stormcore, the new Ludo controller, it has a built-in fan, I believe, right?
Correct. So the major difference between the old Stormcore controller and our new controllers, both of them are still VESC-based controller. They have the same code written inside. As I mentioned earlier, it's all open source, so everyone who's listening to this podcast can work on the software, make it better, and even after that we can do over-the-air update to our customer. It's wonderful. But the main difference between the Stormcore and the Ludo controller, the new one, is, yes, first of all, the built-in fan. This will cool much faster. We also, on the Stormcore, you have half aluminum, half plastic case. This looks super cool, but for heat transfer it's not quite ideal. You want something either all in aluminum or a big heat sink under it, or a fan, to really dissipate the heat. So we went over and above, we put a fan, and everything is in aluminum now. It's all shiny, it's even looking better in my opinion, and it's at our color. It's a beautiful blue.
Nice.
And another feature that is really interesting in the new Ludo is that you have a 12 volt output that you can connect all the light directly, and that output is separate. You have multiple ground and multiple power outputs. So basically, I can connect different light to different switch. So if you just want to turn on the front light, well, we can put a switch for that, and the rear light can be another switch, or even when you press the brake and you want the rear light to blink like a regular scooter, but not affect the front light, well, now you can. And that 12 volt can be upscaled to 24 volts, so the brightness is ridiculous when we do that. So that's really good. There is one downside to the Ludo compared to the Stormcore. Technically, the maximum we can reach, it's about 78 volt. After that, it will just burn, while the Stormcore can reach 100 volt. As we said before, even on 72 volt, the Stormcore was overheating. So yes, you can plug 100 volt on it, but
not for very long.
Yeah, exactly. Practically, you cannot even ride the scooter. And we had overheating issue here in Montreal, so you can imagine in California and those places where it's pretty hot, how disastrous it can be.
Yeah. Wow. So what did I want to go into from there? I guess what was the inspiration for you making this? Because you wanted it to be like a plug and play essentially for most customers, but was it something that customers were already asking for, or just something that you wanted to innovate first?
It was something, I was just wondering why a cheap electric skateboard, so you have electric skateboard at maybe $150 on internet, why do you have such good regen brake that you can come to a complete stop only with the regen, and a high-end electric scooter like, well, all the Zeros or even Ryan, scooters that can be worth like $10,000 don't even have regen brake, and apparently, it's just because the controller, the Chinese controller they're using right now, it's good enough for their market. And if nobody know that you can achieve such good regen, nobody's going to ask for it. And those kind of revolution never start in China. It's someone here or in the US that's going to try to, or everywhere else around the world, but usually it's not within the Chinese factory. They're going to want something better, they're going to develop it, and after that you send it to China for them to make it a standard in the industry. So I was trying to achieve only regen brake, like I was trying to achieve a crazy good amount of regen brake, and ideally you will never need to use mechanical brake in the Ludo. That was the goal behind it. And there's also the whole bit about the configuration of it. So with the Vest controller, you can tweak every little setting, the acceleration curve, the amp that you shoot to the motor, the cutoff voltage. You even have an app that you can control all of this on your phone. Compared to a Chinese controller, you cannot control anything. And that's another thing that I should mention. The main difference between the new Ludo controller and the Stormcore, it's inside. You don't really see it, but the Stormcore, there's one MCU that's gonna... So let me rephrase to get a better explanation. Those controller, they are two controllers in one PCB. So if you open a regular scooter right now, you're gonna see two controllers, and each one of those controllers is gonna control one motors. And the throttle signal and display is split between the two controllers, so you get a good communication between the two modules. With those controllers, with the Ludo controller, the two controllers are built within the same PCB. This means it's taking way less space. The wire management, everything is better. But the difference between the Ludo and the Stormcore, on the Stormcore you have one power management. So basically the battery is shooting the power to the Stormcore, and you have one chip that's going to redirect the power within the two PCB to make it work. So if you burn one of the side of it, so let's say you are stuck in the mud, I don't know, something happened with one of your motor, either the phase wire touch or there's just an overheat on a motor for some reason, those things do happen, the whole Stormcore is going to be burned. You cannot use it anymore. With the Ludo controller, there's two power management. So basically, if you burn one side, you're going to still be able to go to your place or go to either a repair shop or I don't know, with the scooter. It won't be scrapped, basically. You can still use one motor. It's still managed as two separate things, basically. And that's a huge advantage because you can only replace one side of the PCB if you want. You don't need to buy the whole new controller for it.
Interesting. So I guess for maybe less educated people like myself, this works kind of like all-wheel drive, where each wheel is spinning almost independently, sort of, because they have different controllers.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Just want to make sure I'm following along correctly. Cool. That's really interesting. You touched on the regen brakes as well, and that's something that was big from the skateboarding world that you wanted to bring in. What specifically about the regen brake, and maybe touch on maybe how exactly it works too, I guess, for people who don't know.
Yeah, so basically, when you roll, as you know, all our electric scooter have brushless motor inside. This means the stator and the rotor are not connected mechanically. It's just by induction of the magnet. When you spin those, when you induct a charge into those motor, they're gonna spin. Of course, within a bit more technically, you need to induce different phase of the motor. Whatever, we don't need to go into that. Basically, if you don't put a charge into those motor, you can almost invert the polarities of the motor. So instead of creating a movement from the motor, you're gonna create a restriction. When you create a restriction, it's the same principle as let's say a wind turbine is a perfect example. It's the same kind of motor inside a wind turbine. The only difference is you don't shoot electricity to it. You have the wind make it turn, and that turning motion is going to generate voltage, and you can either create electricity with it or store it somewhere. It's the same principle with the regen brake. So basically, I'm telling the controller, instead of shooting power to the motors, invert the polarities and take that power and shoot it back into the batteries. And that's the principle behind the regen brake.
Interesting. And is there a difference between like the regular regen brake that we have on most of our scooters, like the City, the Explorer, and the Ludo regen?
That's a really good question. Basically, in the Chinese controller right now, you have small capacitors. A capacitor is something that is able to store energy. So let's say you want to activate the regen brake right now. Well, you have the small capacitor. That's one part of the difference. And the other difference is that it's an on or off signal that is linked to the brake handle. So when you press the brake handle currently, you have two wires. It's going to detect that you press it or you don't press it. That's it. So if you press it, it's going to activate the regen or e-brake as they call it. That will just do a slight restriction on the motors. If you put your scooter in the air on a bench and you go full throttle and press, let's say, on the front brake handle and you just look at the rear wheel, you're going to see that it's stopping really fast. So you might think that the regen is pretty good, but actually when you are on the scooter and you only try to brake with the regen, you'll see it's almost not doing anything. So that's the difference. Practically. Technically, you have within the Ludo controller, you have 3 wires instead of 2. So what does that mean? It means it's an analog signal. So it's still on or off, but because we have a 3rd wire, we are able to send a gradual signal. So I can either regen a little bit, medium, or I can go hard on the regen. It's able to detect all the level of the regen, basically, of the motion of the throttle. So instead of having just a braking handle that send on or off signal, we link those 3 wires to a regular throttle and we're able to go gradually with it. The other component that I mentioned is the capacitor. Right now, the capacitor inside the Chinese controllers are they're pretty big. It's surprising, but too small to handle such high current. Maybe if we were working on 36 volt or 24 volt like Razer and 9, but it will be doable within the same capacitor. But because we are at 52 volt or 60 volt, we need big capacitor that is able to take all that current and after that slowly discharge it into the batteries.
Interesting. And is there any differences between the Stormcore regen and our new Ludo regen?
It's the same thing.
The same?
Same thing, is the same code inside.
Yeah.
And another major difference I should mention between a Chinese controller and a VES controller is that you are able, so let's say you take a Chinese controller, you plug it inside a scooter. As I mentioned, it's all plug and play. There is no configuration made for that specific controller and throttle, those specific motors and throttle. Basically, the Chinese factory that assembled the scooter is going to take a scooter, they're going to send it to the controller factory. The controller factory is going to say, okay, the motor are 500 watt, it's a 48 volt battery, this is the throttle and this is the range of the throttle when you press on it. We're going to configure that controller like this, and all the future controller that we're going to make for this factory is going to be burned with that configuration. That is good enough for most scooters. Well, for every scooters, as all our riders probably are in, it's this kind of configuration. The main difference with the VES controller is that you are able, all the motors and all the throttles are different within the small values, but they're all different. The range on your throttle, it's a magnet inside with a Hall sensor. The reading is not the same from two identical scooters. There's a small variation, and this is even more true when you go in the electric motors. You have different induction resistance. The winding inside the motors are usually the same, but you still have different restriction, and you really see it when you configure it with the Stormcore controller or any VES controller. You are able to read all the data from this, so you really see the difference within the two same motor. It's quite a lot sometimes. So when you use a VES controller, you are able to get the perfect configuration for that exact hardware that you have on your scooter at that moment. So for the throttle, I'm able to calibrate within, there's maybe 1,000 different variable of the throttle. So basically I'm running a configuration that's gonna, they say, okay, press on the gas throttle, press on the regen throttle, and it's gonna take that motion, that range of throttle, and slice it into 1,000 or 2,000 little different segments. Exactly. So after that, it's impossible to get a better sensation out of your throttle than you have with a VES controller. It's the same thing with the motors. The two same motors on the same scooter is going to be different. So you want the front motor and the rear motor to be tuned differently to really get the best efficiency out of it. And this is one of the reasons why you get up to like 25% of efficiency with those controllers. It's because it's adapt so well to the hardware that is currently on the scooter using that controllers.
I think I understood all of that. Yeah, one of the drawbacks, I guess, of the Stormcore was that we had to configure it. It was very time consuming for you, and I guess the rest of our tech support team, if they helped you out as well. But with this new one that you've developed or are working on still, it's going to be a plug and play where you won't really need to do that, right?
Exactly. We are working on a tool that hopefully is going to auto-configure everything. So the idea is to you plug the controller into your scooter and you run a motion of action. So let's say you press on the brake handle, you end the throttle, at the same time you turn on the scooter. It's going to activate a protocol within the controller and run the detection for a given scooter. So it's not yet configurable to all the scooters. It's not that easy. We need still to send, let's say, the Phantom. We need to take it and send it to that controller factory. So they're gonna say, okay, we're gonna make the configuration tool for a 1,000 watt motor, same thing as the other controller, but it's gonna be able to adapt a bit more to get really the perfect setting for it. But we still need to tell the configuration tool, okay, it's a 1,000 watt motor on this battery that can pull a certain amount of amp. And this will make the configuration tool work. So you can imagine that to expand that to other scooter, because that's the goal. We want that controller to be in every scooters. We need it's exponentially complex to adapt everything, but it's doable, and hopefully the configuration tool will really be a plug and play. This is just the tip of the iceberg, because when you want a configuration tool to be plug and play, or sorry,
Voilà ce que j'ai trouvé.
sorry about that. When you want a controller like this to be plug and play, you have one bit that is the software of it. That's probably the easiest thing to do. But you also have all the wire harness that you need to connect the controller to. So basically, if we want it to be plug and play, it needs to be the same connector. So let me explain how it works on the Phantom.
Back up a little bit.
You have a connector for every component. So for the turning signal, you have an easy plug connector. For the throttle, you have an easy plug connector. For the mode button and the display, same thing. You have an easy plug connector. We need to run all those wires somewhere else with the Ludo version. Hopefully it's going to all run into a PCB that will be located behind the screen. So I need to make custom wire harness that's going to take all those components, take it into the new screen PCB that's going to come with the Ludo, hopefully. And after that, a wire harness that's going to take all this information and run it to the controller. So there's the software aspect of it, there's the physical, mechanical aspect of it that you need to configure like this. And the third one is really the whole configuration thing about to adapt it to every scooter. So you can imagine we need to do custom configuration for every scooter, custom wire harness for every scooter, probably a custom screen for every scooter. Hopefully we're just gonna have one screen that's gonna be as good as the Phantom one that you can put on all your Zero or whatever other scooter you have. But yeah, it's exponentially complex, and we need a bit of more time to be able to do that plug and play option.
So you kind of just touched on there that you wanted, well, I guess the question everyone's been asking, the Ludo controller will be available for the Phantom, and by extension, the Ghost and all the rest of our scooters, you said?
Yes, the goal is to prioritize our lineup first with all those configuration tools, and after that expand to other brands, hopefully. But yes, it's easy to make the Ghost and the Phantom work with the Ludo controller. We have some working downstairs. It's just that with the last Ludo controller, I was really hoping that people will understand the whole thing about the region break and the power you gain. And it seemed that people are really focused on the feature they lose, like the lights and all those kind of stuff. So for the Phantom and the Ghost, I want to make sure that people gain things instead of losing things. So for the Phantom, I want them to be able to keep that big screen. And like I said, hopefully with the Ghost, either you keep a smaller screen like it's currently on the Phantom, on the Ghost, or you gain a bigger one like it is on the Phantom. So we could just rush it out and put it out there right now like we did with the Ludo, but I'm really trying to have something next level for this. But yes, it's possible. We have some. It's just a question of getting all the hardware correct first.
Right, okay. And so you just said too, if they buy the Ludo upgrade, they're not going to lose the screen on the Phantom. They'll still have that feature.
Correct.
Cool.
That's a goal.
And in theory, if we can expand this to other scooters, we could have a supercharged city scooter or something.
What do you mean?
In theory, if we put the new Ludo controller in a smaller scooter.
You can, but that's one of the components we also need to change into our future scooter. There's a bottleneck right now, and it's the BMS of all the scooters. So you have a battery inside every scooter, and that battery is controlled by a BMS. It's called a battery management system. That BMS will make sure that when you charge your scooter, every P group are being charged at a correct voltage. So because one cell need to be at 4.2 volt to work perfectly. If it's 4.3, it's gonna overcharge. It can blow up, and if it's less than that, it's gonna lose its capacity over time. So a BMS, it's extremely important, at least for the charge side. Most of those BMS are also connected to the discharge side. So this means, let's say we take the current Ghost. You have a 25 amp controller linked to that battery. The 25 amp is the power that the maximum power that this controller will be able to draw from the battery. Let's say when you climb a hill, or even when you start from zero, when you ask a load to the battery. That battery could push out 70 amp if we want. It's so big, you can really push more than 25. And again, we are limited at 25 because of those Chinese controllers that have too small capacitor and other component that just gonna burn if you push more. So the other critical thing we need to change, hopefully it's going to change within all scooters, but we're going to start with ours. It's the BMS of those scooters. So instead of limiting something to 25 amp, personally, I think there should be no BMS on the discharge side, just on the charging side to be safe and make sure your battery lasts long. But you don't need something to regulate the discharge of it. Usually it's regulated by the controller, so there's no need to have that extra step between the two, and it's limiting it. You can imagine that if I set up the VEST controller to draw 100 amp for the scooter, but I am only able to get 25 amp from the BMS, well, there's not really a point of having the VEST controller to, or at least to gain power. You still have the regen. So we need to make sure that the other component inside the scooter that we don't really have controls over, because it wouldn't really make sense to sell you a BMS that goes with the VESC, because it's extremely complicated to change. We need to make sure it's able to the BMS is able to follow basically the VESC controller.
Interesting. Okay, so would we have to make a new kind of controller for these smaller scooters, like a single motor scooter instead?
So we are still able to use the current BMS that you have within your scooter and limit the VESC to it. You're still going to gain some power, and the regen is there, the app is there. Every other benefit is there. If you want to put those kind of controllers into a single version motor, that's a different controller altogether. You can use the current controller for a single motor, but you're going to lose one side. Basically, three wires, a three motor phase wire for the second motor will just be tied together and not do anything. It's doable. It's just that when you do this, well, you are still paying for a dual motor controller. You are paying a markup for no reason. We have a prototype of a single motor BESS controller like this, and it's going to be able to be put inside the city, the light, or any other single motor we came up in the future, and hopefully the price is gonna go down. And but that's there's still a question of having a high enough volume to be able to get the lower price for this controller to make sense when we market it. Because as it is right now, if we only have 1, 2, or 3 orders, whatever, even 10 orders or 20 orders, it's not enough to get a significant amount of discount on those controllers to justify the price to the customer, I think. Because if you pay $1,000 for those controller for a scooter that is worth 800, well, it don't make any sense. So we are working on that. We're also working with the assembly factory directly of those PCB to try to bring the price even lower for the single motor. But yes, I think the goal is to have a strong region brake and an app and almost unlimited power within all our scooter in the future.
Interesting. Okay. And the benefit, I guess, to adding those controllers to the smaller scooters is the same, right? Extra speed and extra range even?
Yes,
okay.
Extra range, extra speed, and again, the VESC controller is going to be configured to your exact throttle and motors, and that will give you so much more sensibility, and it's just way more fun to ride with those controllers.
And will people be able to configure some of the settings in these controllers via an app, something like what we have with the Stormcore?
So one of the big problem we had with the old Ludo controller is that people were getting... let me explain. You have two versions of an app for the Ludo controller. You have the iOS one and you have the Android one.
Different.
Two different. Okay. They are not the same. It's not the same people who created. The one for the iOS was made by Lacroix. It's a beautiful app. You can analyze everything. There's still some bug, but they are working them out. It's really more user-friendly. Anyone can install it. You see your speed. It's pretty simple. The one on the Android side was made by the guy who wrote all the code for that controller. Shout out to Benjamin Vedder. He's the one who created that. And basically, with that app, you have access to all the setting. It's so complicated. This app, you change one little setting, and your Ludo won't work anymore.
Oh boy.
So when we were telling people to install the Android app, either because they don't have an iOS device or they want to play with those settings, all of them, without exception, they damage their Ludo. Basically, they were not able to run it at all after that because they were tweaking some setting that they had no idea why they were there. So I'm still hesitant to allow them to control certain variant of the scooter because of that, just because it's so easy to mess up a perfectly fine scooter. And the other thing is, when you have region brake like this, you cannot smash the region throttle when you have 100% battery. So I'm scared that if we allow them to tweak the setting, they're gonna put the region at a maximum, and they're gonna smash the region throttle when it's full, and they're gonna blow up the whole controller.
Oh boy.
So we really need to at least limit the customer to certain value at a certain given time. So either when the scooter is full at 100%, we just deactivate the regen for, 5 kilometers, just to allow the battery to drain a little bit. So after that, it's able to store energy. Because if it's 100%, you can imagine that when you invert the polarities of the motor and you shoot back the current into the controller and then the batteries, if it's at 100%, it's just going to overcharge the batteries. The cell will eat up, and it can explode. So we really need to make sure to limit the customer within those obstacles, if I can say.
Interesting. Yeah. There's a lot of settings that are very important not to touch.
Exactly. So to respond to your question, I think it's possible to give the customer certain thing to play with. Maybe you can play with different gear like eco, medium, and sport mode, or even the throttle curve if you want to make it more aggressive on the region, or the acceleration, yeah. But I think that's going to be about it. I don't want them to mess up any other configuration. And even if I put something as simple as the strength of the region brake, like it's just a slider, how you can mess up anything. When you touch those things, it's affecting other things within the configuration. And even if it's safe for the customer, you can trigger other bug that will happen in the future because that setting will have changed something else in the backend configuration.
Interesting. Okay. Wow, this is all very exciting, all very important though, and it's a lot of work to put in before we're able to release it to customers. But I guess everyone's also asking, when do you think this might be available, and what's maybe our target price too?
So another major reason why we decided to switch from the Stormcore to this controller, it's because of the price. We bought a lot of Stormcore. The price was okay, but we are not able to get a crazy good price because there's just so many middlemen. You have someone making the Stormcore, someone selling it probably in China or assembling it at least, and you have someone like Eloi selling it as a markup because of our business, completely fine. If we want to bring those controllers to the market as a mass mass distribution and production, we need really to access the factory that is making them. That way we are getting the lowest price possible, and I think this is how we're going to be able to get much more out sooner. So basically the goal right now, we talk about the screen, there's probably also going to be custom throttle that come with it, throttle that really going to give you a better feedback on region. You can think of maybe the boosted rev throttle. We really liked it a bit better. I know there was a lot of hate towards it. So for the same controller, we're going to be able to, for the same price, we're going to be able to offer much more. So before with the Stormcore, you were losing everything. Now for the same price, you're going to be able to gain things. So that's one part of it. And the other part is, your question is when can we expect that? I'll say right now the timeline is about 2 months to have the configuration tool ready, because we have those controllers here. They are at my desk. We could just install them right now. It's just, like I said, I want to make sure everything is perfect. So 2 months to finish the configuration tool and to also finish the hardware, so the new throttle and the screen. And after that, we should be able to to send the first sample out for reviews and put it on the website. All that being said, if you want the Ludo now, you can still get it into your Phantom. You will lose the screen though, at least for now. I don't know if it's going to be backward compatibility, but you're going to lose it, and but it's still possible. And if you want it into your Ghost, if you want it to anything, we can do it. It's just, I'll suggest you wait a bit until we have everything figured out.
Right.
But if you really don't want to wait, you can get it as soon as now. Just ask it on the chat.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool. I think that's all the questions I had about it. I tried to keep up as best I can, and hopefully there's lots of people interested in this. Was there anything else that you want to touch on or highlight, maybe between the differences of the new Ludo and the Stormcore, or?
I just want to say again, there's one thing. It's again, some people might say, like, why is 9bot able to do such thing as region brake on the 9bot ES2, ES4, all those kind of low model? Again, it's because of the low voltage of the battery. This is where the Ludo controller shine. You cannot have a controller like the 9bot one into something at 60 volts. It's impossible. It's too small. It's going to generate heat. So that's the reason, because we got those questions a lot. And yeah, so I think that's about it. The last thing I'll say is that Apollo is here to change and revolutionize the industry, from the tire to the controller, passing by the customer experience. 1 year ago, we're only 3 guys in an apartment working. Now we're 10 full-time employees. I think we can agree that we came up with one of the best controller ever made for an electric scooter. We're now also known for our customer service experience that is probably the best of all companies. So my message to all the competitors who tried to make us fail in the beginning with their shady tactic, we are coming for you.
And on that, we'll end it. Thank you for all tuning in. This was Mission Apollo. My guest again, Eloi. And tune in next time. See who our next guest will be. Thank you very much.